The image you probably have of Vikings is completely wrong. No shining armor, no heroic music, no glory, just cold, hunger, and survival. If you were born in a Viking village, your life didn't begin with adventure. It began with a test to see if you were strong enough to live. The North was unforgiving. Winters lasted for months. Sometimes it felt like forever. The sun would disappear for days, and the cold would crawl into everything. Your skin, your bones, your breath. And food. Food was never certain. Families depended on short summers, small harvests, and what little they could store. If something went wrong, if crops failed, if animals died, you didn't struggle. You starved. And children felt this the most, from a very young age. You were not protected from reality. You were introduced to it. By the age of 5 or 6, you were already learning how to survive, not through games, but through necessity. Boys were taught to hunt. At first, small things, rabbits, birds, anything they could catch. They learned how to move quietly, how to track footprints in snow, how to be patient. Because one day, that skill could be the difference between eating or starving. Girls were no less important. They learned how to prepare food, preserve meat, care for animals, and manage the home. But this wasn't a safe role, because the home was survival itself. And despite all of this, children still found ways to be children. They played, but even their games were preparing them for life. Mock fights with wooden swords, throwing stones, testing strength, competing against each other. It looked like play, but it was training. Because weakness was not something the world would forgive. Family life was close, but not easy. Entire families lived together, in long houses. One large space, no privacy. Fire in the center, smoke filling the air. Animals sometimes inside, to keep them alive during winter. Families could be large, many children, because not all would survive. That was the reality. Death was present, even in the home. Illness spread quickly. There was no real medicine, no safety, no guarantees. And yet, there was something else, something people don't often talk about. Connection. Stories told around the fire, voices echoing in the dark, mothers teaching, fathers guiding, older siblings watching over the younger ones. For a moment, in that small space, there was warmth, not from the fire, but from each other. But that warmth never lasted forever, because every child growing up in that world knew one thing: this life was only the beginning. And if you couldn't survive here, you would never survive. What came next? You are still a child, standing outside the longhouse, watching the men prepare. Your father is there. Maybe your older brother. Maybe someone you look up to, someone you want to become. They don't say much. They never do. But you can feel it. This isn't just another day. This is departure. You watch them gather weapons, axes, shields, simple things. But in their hands, they mean survival or death. Your mother stands behind you, silent. She's seen this before. She knows what this means, because when they step onto that ship, they are not just leaving. They are disappearing. Some will come back with silver, with stories, with scars. Others won't come back at all, lost at sea, taken by storms, or killed in lands far away. And the worst part, sometimes you never know what happened. No body, no grave, just absence. Years pass, you grow. The games become harder, the expectations heavier. You are no longer just surviving. You are preparing for a choice. Because now, people look at you differently. Not as a child, but as someone who must decide, what kind of life will you live? Not everyone became a Viking. That's the truth most people ignore. Some stayed, farmers, blacksmiths, traders. They worked the land, they built homes, they raised families, and their lives were still hard, still brutal, still uncertain. But at least they were alive. So why leave? Why risk everything? Because staying was its own kind of death. Not enough land, not enough food, too many mouths to feed. If you were not the one who inherited, you had nothing. No future, no path. So the sea became the only option. But it wasn't just survival. There was something else, something dangerous. Hope, stories of men who left and came back different, stronger, wealthier, respected, men who had seen the world, men who had taken what they wanted. And when you grow up hearing those stories over and over again, something changes inside you. Now it's your turn. You stand where they once stood, the same shore, the same cold wind, the same silence. And now, you understand. This is not about adventure. This is not about glory. This is about choosing your fate. Stay and live a life of struggle you already know, or leave and face a world that might destroy you. And deep down, you already know which one you're going to choose. Before the sea, there was a plan. Raids didn't happen by chance. They were organized, led by a chieftain or a man with enough influence to gather others. But not everyone could go, and not everyone was chosen. A Viking crew was not just a group of random men. It had to work. Each man had a role. Rowers, fighters, experienced sailors. Because on that ship, if one failed, everyone paid the price. Most ships carried between 20 to 60 men, sometimes more. And when several ships sailed together, it became something else. Not just a journey, a force. But even then, space was tight. There were no cabins, no beds, no comfort. You lived on the ship. You slept on the wood. You endured everything. Food was limited. Water could run out. Dried meat, fish, whatever could last. If the journey took longer than expected, things changed. Rations got smaller. Voices got quieter. Because everyone knew what came next. And then, there was the sea. At first, it feels like freedom. Wind pushing the sails, water stretching endlessly. But that feeling never lasts. Storms didn't warn you. They arrived, violent, sudden, unstoppable. The sky turned black. Waves rose like walls. The ship felt small, too small. Water crashed over the deck, freezing, relentless. Your clothes stayed wet. Your body couldn't warm up. Your hands stopped feeling. And the cold, it didn't just hurt. It consumed you. Men kept rowing, not because they were strong, but because stopping meant death. Exhaustion built up. Sleep became impossible. Fear became constant. And then, someone falls. No scream, no time. 1 second he's there. The next, he's gone. You look back, but there's nothing. Just waves, just darkness. No rescue, no turning back. Because if you try, you risk everyone else. So you keep going, like nothing happened. Days pass, or maybe weeks. You lose track. The men around you start to change. Less talking, more silence. Eyes empty. This is no longer an adventure. This is survival. And deep down, a thought begins to grow. What if you never make it? You survived the sea. But here's the truth. That was the easy part. Because what comes next is worse. Much worse. When Vikings reached land, They didn't just start fighting blindly. That's what movies get wrong. They planned, they watched from a distance, studied the village, looked for patterns, where people gathered, where food was stored, where resistance might come from. Speed was their greatest weapon. Raids were not long battles. They were fast, precise, brutal. They attacked when people least expected. Early morning, late night, moments of weakness. And once it began, there was no stopping it. They didn't always stay together. Some moved in groups, others split off, searching, taking, destroying, because the goal was not just victory, it was gain. They were looking for things, not just random destruction. Silver, gold, food, weapons, anything valuable, anything useful, anything that could be carried back. And yes, sometimes people too. Captured, taken as slaves, sold later. But there was something else, something harder to explain. The feeling, adrenaline, chaos, power. In that moment, you weren't the starving boy from the north. You weren't weak, you weren't struggling. You were feared, and the violence was real. Close combat, axes, blades, shields breaking. No distance, no safety. You could feel the impact, hear the screams, see the consequences right in front of you. But what made it even more terrifying was what they believed. Vikings didn't just fight for survival. They fought for something beyond. They believed that dying in battle was not the end. It was a reward. If you died bravely, you were chosen, taken to Valhalla, a hall of warriors where you would fight, feast, and live forever, side by side with gods like Odin. So fear worked differently. Death was not something to avoid. Sometimes it was something to chase. And that changes everything. Because when a man no longer fears death, he becomes unpredictable, dangerous, relentless. So the next time you imagine Vikings as just warriors chasing glory, remember this. They weren't just fighting others. They were fighting to become something more, even if it meant losing everything. You fought, you survived, and somehow you made it further than most. Not just raids anymore, not just destruction. Something changed. The land you once attacked became the land you stayed on. Vikings didn't just take from England. Some of them stayed. They built, they farmed, they created something new. For the first time, there was stability. Food that didn't depend on luck. Land that could be yours. A future that didn't exist back home. But it came at a cost, because not everyone agreed. Some wanted more raids, more war, more glory. Others wanted peace, a different life. And that divide changed everything. Some Vikings turned away from the old ways. They adopted new beliefs, Christianity, a different god, a different future. Not Odin, not Thor, not Valhalla. And for some, that was seen as betrayal. But others went even further. They didn't just change. They chose sides, fighting alongside those they once attacked, turning against their own people, for land, for power, for survival. Because in the end, loyalty didn't always win. Survival did. And that's the part no one talks about. The Vikings didn't disappear. They changed, adapted, blended into the world they once feared. And now, so have you. You left as a boy, hungry, cold, desperate. You crossed the sea. You fought. You saw things. You can never forget. Men you knew, gone. Voices, silenced. Parts of yourself, lost. And now, you stand here, alive, but different. The war is behind you. The sea is quiet. The land is yours. And yet, something feels missing. Because the truth is, you survived everything. The cold, the hunger, the sea, the war. But survival has a price. And sometimes, that price is who you used to be. So now, after everything you've seen, everything you've become, I have to ask you, was it worth it?